Oh, Erika.
Are you excited?
I'm so excited because last week in episode 131 on Genesis 14 and 15, I made the flippant remark.
Right.
Well, I don't know what Melchizedek has to do. He's just a little tiny gun, and he was only there because he was the king of Salem.
Right.
And when we were going over before recording, you were like jaw-dropping, dumbfounded at how foolish and naive I could be. And you were like, oh, no. Right. And then I was like, okay, well, I really don't know. And I was feeling stupid.
Oh,
but no, not in a bad way. Just like, oh, what did I miss?
Know. Right.
But then it made me feel better because your husband didn't even know this.
No.
So when Brian Van doesn't know it, I can go, woo, woo.
Right. You're in good company.
Yes. So this is episode 133. We're going to call it a shorty.
Yeah, it should be shorter.
Yeah, I like that. Shorter. But what I'm excited, you are going to take that gun of Melchizedek.
Right.
And you are going to blow our minds.
Right. It blew my mind.
Yes.
God is amazing.
So we're starting, the foundation would be Genesis 14 then.
Yes.
Where Melchizedek gets referenced as the king of Salem.
Yep.
He blessed he blessed God.
And Abraham. Yep.
And Abraham. After Abraham had returned Lot.
Right. Yeah.
Rescued Lot.
Oh, good word. Yep.
So that's where I'm now going to zip my lips.
Right.
And hand it over to you.
All right. So you should have read, hopefully by now, Genesis 14, like you said, Veronica, but also Psalm 110, and then Hebrews 5, 6, and 7.
Because I'm going to start promoting that on social media
right
before this goes out.
Right. We're not going to take the time to read them tonight. So hopefully, if you haven't read them, read them. Otherwise, hopefully you're all set. But first, we need to set up the foundation of holiness. So you can think about it as spheres of holiness or levels of holiness.
Sure.
God being at the top. The bottom level is the Gentiles, us. And then the next level would be Israelites. And then the level above that, Levites. And then priests. And then the highest level underneath God would be the high priest.
So every group gets a little bit smaller and narrower.
Yes.
Like every Levite is an Israelite.
Right.
But every Israelite is not a Levite.
Right.
And every priest is a Levite.
Right.
But every Levite is not a priest.
Right.
Okay.
And each group up has more restrictions on their life.
Right.
And how they're supposed to live. Because as you get closer to God, you get more set apart. And you look more different. And the high priest is able once a year to go into the presence of God on earth in the temple or the tabernacle. And he is therefore able to carry the presence of the people with him into God's presence. But then he's also able to carry God's presence out with him to the people. So when you have a priest or a high priest involved in your worship, you have access to levels of worship you don't have, to levels of holiness.
Right.
You don't have without them. And you see a point of this in Leviticus 9 when they set up the tabernacle and Aaron starts the sacrifices and enters the tabernacle and fire from heaven falls and the people are on their faces. And it's this amazing, powerful moment of awe and worship. But that's what having a high priest will do to your worship. It will take you farther into the presence of God than you can go yourself. So fast forward to the time of Jesus. And the second temple's been rebuilt. And at this point in time, the high priesthood office has been filled by a very corrupt man.
Right.
I believe he's a Levite, but they have bribed the Romans to give them the office. This family, Caiaphas and his whole family, they're corrupt as can be, but the office of high priesthood is still a holy office.
Right.
You know, it's like you may not respect the office of president or prime minister. I mean, the person in that.
Right. You respect the office,
but you respect the office. Right. And so the believers were still going to the temple daily to worship, to pray. We go through, the high priest was a Sadducee. Yeah, I think you said, Veronica, listen to our Acts.
Yeah, go back to Acts. I don't know which one. Do the whole series.
Right. And that will help explain more about the temple and the high priest. But the high priest, the Sadducees were the enemies of Jesus. He barely interacts with them.
Right.
They are like the opposite. They don't believe in the resurrection, in angels, the Messiah, life after death.
Anything after the first 5 books of the Old Testament.
So when they kill Jesus and then he's resurrected, it's a double, like, first of all, we don't believe in the Messiah and we don't believe you can be resurrected.
Right.
So they go after the apostles. Well, finally, 30 years later, they kick him out of the temple.
So in the 60s.
In the 60s, yeah, AD, they finally get the Jewish believers kicked out of the temple.
Mm-hmm.
And now, but picture it, Veronica, if you're a believer at that point in time, you have lost your access to God on earth.
Sure.
The presence of God resides in the temple.
Mm-hmm.
The high priest is the one who carries my prayers into the presence of God. Mm-hmm. I no longer can go to the temple.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do I do?
Right. You would feel that loss.
Right.
That restriction, that boundary just that chasm got so much bigger.
Right.
And I can't even...
What do I go?
Right.
Where do I go? This is where God's presence is. This is how, as a Jewish person, I've been directed to worship.
Right.
What do I do? And they were struggling and they were tempted to, fine, we'll give up Jesus because then we can go back to the temple.
Right.
And so the book of Hebrews was written to encourage these Jewish believers, specifically in Jerusalem, don't give up Jesus. You need to hold on to him.
Okay.
And he goes, because you have a high priest, and he's better. But as acknowledging that Jesus is the high priest, though, becomes a problem. Because what tribe does Jesus come from?
The Lion of Judah.
Yeah.
Which would be the tribe of
He's
Judah.
the tribe of Judah. The high priest, no priest can come from a different tribe.
Right.
God set it up. You have to be a Levite to be a priest, and then you have to be a priest to become high priest.
Right.
So how can Jesus from the tribe of Judah...
He jumped ship.
Right, exactly. Be a high priest. He can't. Even David could not be a priest.
David even couldn't even walk in as far as the priest did. Because God set it up, and you honored God.
Right, and the distinctions. So how do we handle this? How can Jesus be a priest? Well, the author of Hebrews starts to research through the scriptures. Where else do I see a priest who's a high priest of God, but he's not of the tribe of Levi?
Oh.
And his brain settles on Genesis 14 and Psalm 110.
Okay.
So you have to know both of those. Psalm 110 specifically says you are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek.
Oh, yeah.
And all of a sudden, his brain goes ding, 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 Melchizedek. What do we know of Melchizedek, Veronica? King of righteousness. Melchizedek is king of righteousness. He's also king of Jerusalem. And they say it's Jerusalem, Shalom, king of peace. And he's high priest. Who else do we know is a king and priest? And on top of that, king of righteousness, king of peace, and king of Jerusalem. Well, that sounds a lot like our Messiah. Oh, but wait, it continues. Not only that, Melchizedek, sorry, it's Hebrew Melchizedek.
I love how she's been saying this whole time.
That's how I keep wanting to say it. I'm just probably going to say Melchizedek because that's how the Hebrew pronunciation is. He has no father or no mother, and we don't read of his death.
Right.
So God says of him, you are a priest forever. Well, Melchizedek is not a Levite.
Right.
He is a priest that doesn't come from the tribe of Levi, but he's a high priest. So he's got his own order.
Right. Well, because he wasn't Jewish. He wasn't Jewish because Abraham's right there.
Right.
You can't even have the tribe of Levi yet.
Right. So he's outside of that, but he's a priest forever because we never read that Melchizedek died. Now, yes, as a man, he would have died, but we don't read about it. So the only way to belong to this special order of priests is you have to live forever. Well, who was just raised from the dead and will now live forever? Okay, so we've got these connections. Jesus is a high priest, and his priesthood is not from the tribe of Levi. He's a priest in the order of Melchizedek. So, but let's continue. What happened between Melchizedek and Abraham, Veronica? Who blessed who?
Melchizedek blessed Abraham.
And the greater blesses the lesser. So who was greater? Melchizedek. And Abraham paid the tithe to Melchizedek. So who's greater?
Melchizedek.
Right. I'm throwing you with the
I know
words
you are.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Melchizedek is greater than Abraham. And in fact, the author of Hebrew tells us it's almost like Levi was in the loins of his father as a descendant. So it's almost like Levi was blessed by Melchizedek. And it's like Levi tithed to Melchizedek.
Right.
So Melchizedek's order of priesthood is greater than Levi's. So therefore, our high priest Jesus, because he's in the order of Melchizedek, is greater than the order of the priesthood that comes through Levi.
Right.
If Levi's priesthood was amazing, and it was a huge blessing, it is a blessing.
Right.
Jesus is that much better.
Right.
And his high priesthood is that much greater than what came through Aaron. So what temple is our high priest serving in then? He can't be a high priest on earth.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's not a Levite. So where does he serve as high priest?
The heavenly tabernacle.
The heavenly temple. The actual full presence of God is residing in a heavenly temple, and that is where our high priest serves. So if you need to enter the presence of God, you go through your high priest.
Right.
And he carries you in, not on an earthly temple where a partial presence resides, but into the actual presence of God in heaven. That is where your prayers, in the name of Jesus, remember we talked about that, your prayers get carried through him to the presence of God. That's where your high priesthood is.
And truthfully, if I had to pick one, dude,
Right.
I want that one.
Right.
I want the high priest of Melchizedek.
Right.
You know, because this one's great, but if I can have amazing,
Right. Exactly.
I want the amazing.
Yes.
It doesn't negate the great, but
right.
I
This
just-
is better.
right.
Right.
So
So
Hershey's chocolate or Godiva chocolate.
Exactly. Thank you for speaking my language. So that's why, okay, you Jewish believers, yes, it's hard. But you can hang in there because you still have a high priest.
Right.
And he is greater and he is better.
Right. Don't lose hope.
Don't lose hope. So that's that little gun.
Right? That
of
little
Melchizedek.
Right,
That's-
and I have Hebrews memorized, and so it just as Erica's saying all this, it's like all
Right.
those verses in chapters 5, 6, and 7 are just like,
Boom.
there's so much more in Hebrews,
Right.
and
There's a depth there, a beauty.
Yes.
And that's what I love about scripture in God. Like you
Right?
think you've learned it and then you're like, I never knew that.
yes,
That's amazing.
yes. Sorry, I probably just blew everyone's ears off.
Right.
But that's so cool, and that's
Right.
when I said to her, I'm like, oh, you really do need to come back and tell me what I'm missing, because Erika responded, if you haven't listened to last week's episode 131, Erika was kind of like, how do you not know?
Right.
And then it was like, I don't.
Right.
And so it's like, no, you need to come back because I think there's something there.
Right. But now, listener, you know as
Yes.
well the importance of Melchizedek
Yes.
and what it means.
Yes. So thanks for joining us. This is the Context in Color of the Bible podcast, and we will talk to you next week.
Bye-bye.